Welcome back, folks. It's RGR Football. We are getting ready to get another week of work in out at Arrowhead One Drive. How are you, Matt?
Doing pretty well, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm keeping together. I'm enjoying the spring for once. Usually I'm pretty tired at this point, but I'm a little pepped up. And I know you're pepped up too because you're doing things at Chiefs Digest. You're doing things at KC Sports Network. You guys check all that stuff out. Matt Derrick, you can see his Twitter handle there. Matt got to see the first weekend, and as we're getting ready to go into the second weekend here, as there's more things on the table, just in general, how optimistic are you about what the difference is between this offseason to this point and last offseason, the complete lack of an offseason?
I mean, it's almost night and day, especially talking to the coaches and some of the players. One notable, we got to talk to Dalton Schoen, who's obviously a Kansas City kid, went to K-State. And, as a rookie last year, it was brutal, with not having any rookie minicamp, not having any OTAs. That rookie class was behind the eight ball from the very beginning. And I think you saw it, obviously, even in Kansas City with a guy like Willie Gay. If Willie Gay were a rookie this year, I think he would absolutely be more involved in the defense and would probably have felt a lot more comfortable because, those workouts that you get, between rookie minicamp, OTAs, the veteran minicamp, these rookies are going to have 16 practices under their belt before they get to training camp. And they didn't have that rookie class didn't have that last year. So I think this group's at a, tremendous advantage. It's still not quite as good as, 2019 and before, because with the virtual meetings and the virtual installs, they're good, but they're not the same as in person. And it's never going to be quite the same. But I think everybody's relieved that, that they have been able to get back together, that they are doing these workouts in person, that they are getting these practices, because they are absolutely critical for young players.
Yeah, for last year's as well, because of all those reasons, having some of the rookie class from last season be able to participate, I think that goes a long way. Of the guys that I think might get a chance at playing time early in the season, say the first quarter, Creed and Bolton, obviously the top two picks of this draft class. When you take a look, just at obviously all we've seen to this point is movement skills, but when you look at Nick Bolton on the practice field, it seemed to me like the transition from Mizzou to Kansas City was not that big a leap as many thought it was going to be, in terms of being able to execute drops, do the things, obviously be comfortable in it. I think his confidence in his intelligence is actually what helps him mostly with that. But in seeing what you saw, can you make that leap towards, hey, if Hitch has an injury, he looks like physically he can go in and play tomorrow?
Yeah, he looks physically like he can do it. There certainly looks like there's a comfort level out there. Hey, everybody's got to pick up the mental aspect of it, and it's different for every player. I think that the Chiefs expect and believe that with Bolton, because of just how much experience he's got compared to what Willie Gay had. Gay with the suspensions and some other issues doesn't have nearly the snaps under his belt at a college level that Nick Bolton does. And I think that's going to manifest itself. And then you add in, with the work that he's going to be able to get this year compared to what the rookies got last year. I think that mental aspect is going to come along pretty quickly, because honestly, I think that the physical skills are not probably the biggest concern. The biggest concern with Nick Bolton being on the field and Anthony Hitchens not is, are you going to be able to trust him to call the defenses? Are you going to be able to trust him to be in a leadership role? And that he's going to have to pick up a little bit more quickly. But I think right now you're seeing a player who moves well, seems to carry himself with confidence. Coaches have some confidence, and having this period now where they can get that instruction. He's going to benefit from that. Especially in a rookie minicamp when you don't have as many guys. He can work with Matt House, he can work with Clint Flagel, and pick up things a lot faster.
And that's an interesting thing. Like, for me, when I'm able to observe camp or whatever, it always stands out to me is who's talking to X player. So is it House, or is Spags getting in his ear early as well because he knows he's going to be talking to him in that capacity at some point? That stands out to me. I'm not sure if you got to see any of that given the period that you were able to witness, but I feel like that's the road that it's going down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we only got the one full practice period, and we got one individual drill period on Saturday, and then everything got rained down on Sunday, and then moved inside. But yeah, it looked like the coaches were all doing a pretty good job of getting around and trying to talk to the rookies. Yeah, most of that coaching is falling on the assistants. But you definitely saw Andy and both the coordinators moving around quite a bit, trying to get in touch with everybody and working with everybody a little bit. And once again, I mean, that's the benefit of honestly a small rookie minicamp, is that they're able to give a little bit more of that one-on-one instruction than they would in most years.
Yeah, I like that aspect of it. We heard numbers that they were in pretty good shape. We talked about that on Locked On Chiefs this past week. As we start to look forward about what their process is going to be, we'll get to a player of question here in a second. What do you see, like, in terms of from this point forward? They're going to start actual activities. They're going to have what their normal process, what is it, 10 days this year for OTAs? Do you feel like it's enough right now that it's almost feels normal to everybody? I know the volume isn't there, but the process is the same, right?
Yeah, it's starting to. It's still a little bit different with the virtual meetings. I mean, that's still the part that everybody's kind of still feeling themselves through and everything. And I tell you what, I mean, this makes me think about last year at this time when we were talking about the fact that we believed that the Chiefs were going to have an advantage because they had so much continuity and so much institutional knowledge coming back. And yeah, I think that proved that was a big part of their success last season. But at the same time, I think we forget how intricate Andy Reid's offenses are. And I think that, yeah, those 16 practices and the 13 for the vets that the Chiefs lost last year, and the beginning of even training camp that the Chiefs lost last year to that acclimation period, I mean, that was 20 odd practices that the Chiefs missed with the ability to get on the field and learn the screen game, learn the blocking. I mean, and this year with the Chiefs having a lot of new faces, especially on that offensive line, yeah, I think this next period, the phase 3, when they get into the OTAs and the mandatory minicamp, I think it's going to be critical for the Chiefs, because that's where Andy Reid starts to really truly install his offense. I mean, they've done it so far on virtual meetings, but it's not the same as doing it in person.
Well, and obviously the rules are still in place. The mask thing has been relaxed. We understand that for vaccinated players and coaches, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't seen specifically, and maybe are they still ferrying back and forth and doing meetings in Arrowhead itself?
They haven't had to at this point because they've been doing everything virtually. So the vast majority of the players until this week were doing things from home. Some of the restrictions are still in place as far as how many guys can be in the weight room for strength and conditioning. They've still got to vary that, and the players can only be in the facility, I believe it's 3 hours a day anyway. And they got 4 hours of meetings, it's 2 hours at the facility. They got 4 hours of meetings that they're doing generally remotely. I mean, some of them they have been doing in individual rooms. They can still do that. What the league's trying to avoid is the 90 guy meetings or the 45 players. I mean, they want to make sure that they limit that. And right now, that's why all these meetings are virtual, because they want to try and keep as few people in a room together. I think you're right. And I think you're leaning in the right direction. I think we're going to see some of that lifted, and it certainly is not the restrictions that they had last year, because even in a facility now, indoors, if you're fully vaccinated, they're allowing you to go without a mask. So there's more proximity than there was a year ago at this time.
I'll be interested to see if they keep some of things like their food service, et cetera, training table. That they made some significant changes to. I'm sure we'll hear more about that this week, but they're also continuing to jostle the roster, as good teams do. And as Brett Veach has told us, he's going to. One thing, they only had 5 trial players at rookie camp, and they ended up signing one, a guy that I had my eye on when he came out, and I'm actually really intrigued by him. But Dries Fountain has an uphill battle because he got signed into probably the most populous position room on this roster. Do you think that is, and especially combined with the departure then of Tajay Sharp, who's got some snaps in the league, like, A, I find that a positive, and B, I think it lifts the whole room in providing more competition, including the rookie class. How do you see that wide receiver core right now?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's definitely a challenge because, the Chiefs really have, I mean, if throwing in Powell, I mean, you got 5 guys that you feel like pretty likely to make the team. I mean, unless there's injuries or unless someone really comes in and proves themselves. And even then, a guy like Fountain, he's still going to have to, even to battle for a 6th or a 7th spot or spots on the practice squad, you're going up against guys like Marcus Kemp and Gary Dieter. I mean, guys who've been around a while. So that room is still pretty deep. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes to show that, the Chiefs are continuing to try to look for some youth in that room. They're looking for, different bodies. I mean, the fact that Fountain is able to come in and they're feeling better about having him around than a guy who's been around for a while, like Sharp, that you felt like it, if he could get back to where he used to be, he's a really good player. I mean, I think if you're Fountain, I mean, you're feeling pretty confident that the Chiefs were willing to take an investment with you. And I think he is, he's a kind of player that I'm not sure they have a lot of bodies that fit exactly that mold right now. I mean, he's got some size to him, got some decent speed. So, I'm really interested and he's got some NFL experience. I mean, he's been around in an NFL roster, so he's not a complete newcomer. So yeah, I think it's an intriguing addition.
I think he and Callaway are the two that we have to watch probably the closest before that competition with Kemp and Dieter in particular. But as we get ready, they start back on the field, on the 25th?
Next Monday, the 24th is the first day for phase 3.
Okay. So at that point, it's got to be like ready, set, go right from the get-go, right? Because it's small things that I think can change the personnel's outcome here, right? Because there's going to be more churn. Do you see any of those 4 guys in the newcomer, Kemp, Dieter, and Callaway, anybody that you particularly want to keep your eye on?
I mean, with all those guys, I think the key is going to obviously be special teams. I mean, that's how any of those guys are going to make the roster or even stick around the practice squad. I mean, it's going to be what they have there. Callaway is certainly the most interesting because at this point, the most experienced. He probably, to a degree, has maybe the toughest uphill job because he's a little bit more expensive than the other guys. So, he's going to definitely have to show this team something. The Chiefs know what they have in Marcus Kemp and Gary Dieter. So I would expect that they're going to take a really hard look at Callaway and Fountain and some of the other guys too, just to give them the opportunities. And that might come at the expense of some other guys, especially during here in OTAs. Hey, the real question is, who earns the right to make their way to St. Joe? I mean, this roster is still going to turn over, and you got to keep doing it. I mean, if you're Reese Fountain, you can't lean back on one good weekend. I mean, you got to keep doing it.
Yeah, and I will say this too, like it's one thing to get this far; it's a lot to get farther, and it seems like this week and the next week and the next week. So for several weeks here, folks, nobody's winning jobs. I think the only thing that can happen is losing jobs in these next few weeks, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the case. I mean, you're much more likely to lose a job in May than you are to win a job. Even if you move up the depth chart at this time of year, it's no promises for the future. And I'm really interested to see what the Chiefs do because, normally, the Chiefs and Andy Reid especially are a start with the veterans and let the young guys win their roles and win their jobs. And, and right now, I mean, even though we're talking about there being more offseason than there was in the last year, there's still not as many snaps and reps and looks to go around. So I wonder, will we see a little bit more of the young guys and the unproven guys early on just to see what they have during this period? Or will it be, kind of as usual, which is, you're going to see the veterans starting out with the, number one offense, number one defense in the teams and forcing the young guys to win their way onto the squad.
Personally, I mean, we can talk about the defense in a minute, but offensively, you mentioned it on Locked On Chiefs this week, the fact Tom Melvin had 2 guys at rookie camp, right? And the vet showing him the ropes was Jody Fortson to Noah Gray, right? For me, I say give Travis most of camp off, except for that 3rd game, right? Because I want to see the battle between Bell, Kaiser, and those 2 guys. It's interesting to me that you're putting that much emphasis into Gray, who obviously was not a top 100 pick, but they seem to really, really like what he brings to the table. I am hopeful of new wrinkles into the offense, specifically around what the H can do, whether it's Gray or Mike Burton or whoever it's going to be. New things from Andy. Do you think that the battle actually has an effect on that? And do you think that we could see Gray and Fortson win out against the 2 guys that have played snaps for this team before?
I think it's a tough question because that tight end group I think is really going to be kind of a different position group to watch because obviously Travis is there. I mean, you know what he is, And yeah, he's still going to get his team will look with the first team offense. And when you get to training camp and they start to moving into 12 personnel, I would expect that, yeah, I think Fortson and Gray are going to get some of those reps alongside, Bell. But, with Bell, I think what the Chiefs have there is a blocking tight end that can also catch the football and not just be a completely empty threat out there when he's on the field. It won't be just the case where, hey, Blake Bell's in the field to run the football, so everybody, watch the run. Right. Conversely, I mean, honestly, Fortson and Gray might be a little bit of the other way. I mean, if they're on the field, pretty good chance the Chiefs are throwing the football. But I really want to see what both those guys can do. I mean, because, Fortson in particular, we've been saying it for a while. I mean, he's a really unique player. And the tough thing for him is that he's a hybrid. I mean, he's a tweener in so many respects. Not quite a receiver, not quite a tight end, but just looks like a skill set that you should be able to get something out of. And hopefully the Chiefs have now moved into the tight end room permanently, hopefully finally, that he'll get that chance. But I think that number 3 spot is definitely going to be who can be on the field when Travis Kelce's not and still help you. Because that's what the Chiefs have lacked, is the ability to give Travis Kelce some breathers, to get him off the field, let him rest. If he goes down, somebody who can come in and at least give you 80%, 70% of what Travis Kelce can give you. Honestly, that's been the challenge. They haven't had that guy. So I think you got to give both these guys a chance to try and develop that and see what they have.
Well, and for me, if Gray in particular allows Andy to play more with 12 and have that personnel as a bigger package this season, whether it's in the H, when you do want to give Travis a lift, you can then use, I think, Fortson and Gray as the combination that you can together get all of Travis out there, right? Because you can get the true wide receiver out of Fortson a little bit more, right? And so maybe the two guys can actually make up for what is the same variability you can get out of one player in Kelce. But for me, it all comes down to how much 12 is in the game plan for the season for Andy Reid.
And honestly, you know what? It probably circles a little bit back to what the Chiefs are doing on the offensive line, because they're hoping that if they've got 5, maulers out there, mountain guys out there, that you don't have to chip as much, that you don't have to rely on tight ends to help out with the blocking even a little bit. That, yeah, I mean, it lets you play maybe a little bit more traditional 12. And because let's face it, at this point, with Gray and Fortson both in their development and their body types, I'm not expecting either one of those guys to be able to block consistently. Right. I mean, you can teach any tight end, and you should be able to teach any tight end how to chip. Not all of them learn it and can do it, but you should be able to teach most of them how to, do the elemental basics. And if you can do that, you can survive. But I think the Chiefs are also hoping that, their offensive line is to the point this year where they don't have to rely on tight ends to help them out as much.
Yeah, absolutely. On the defensive side, I think there's a lot of competition there. I think that's really what this whole training camp is going to be about. And right now, where we're at in the very early OTA part of the season, the guy that most intrigues me is probably the newest member here is Mike Hughes, because I would have thought they felt pretty comfortable before, but now they have gone youth at the cornerback position. I don't see any veteran coming in. I think he's probably got the most snaps of anyone outside of Ward right at this point, and I think they came in the league the same year, so they're right on par. It almost feels to me like Hughes is nearly a walk-in starter in the top 3. Is that how you read it?
I think he's got to work his way in there. Yep. I mean, and mostly that just goes back to the fact that I think Rashad Fenton's been underrated. And, I think that the Chiefs are pretty comfortable with him as a number 3 guy. I mean, I think clearly you look at it right now, and yes, you are going to be asking L'Jarius Sneed to step up into a full-time role. Whether that means he's exclusively on the outside or he's going to be moving back and forth, we'll see. But I think that the Chiefs are comfortable with those top 3 guys. It's up to Baker and Hughes to really, kind of solidify those next few spots. And, because honestly, I mean, if Mike Hughes becomes your 5th corner and he earns that spot, I don't think that's a bad thing. If his ceiling is that he can win a number 2 spot and he can climb that high and move into a starting lineup, then I think you're in really good shape. I don't get the sense that the Chiefs are counting on that because they don't know what they have. I mean, The fact that he obviously clearly passes physical gives you a sense that the Chiefs feel like the neck issue is not currently a problem. But now he's just got to be able to respond to the coaching. I mean, didn't always click at times in Minnesota, and maybe the injuries were an issue with that. But it wasn't always spectacular play. And some of that can certainly just come down to scenery and coaching. And if he responds, great. But, when you give up 40, 30 position spots in the 6th and 7th rounds for a player, I mean, what are the expectations? I mean, the expectations really should be, if the guy gives you any contributions, that's great. Mm-hmm. But because this is the kind of move that, the Chiefs, with the commitment that they've made, it's the kind of move that you're saying, you know what, if it doesn't work, we're moving on. But if it works, great.
That's fair. I just look at it from the experience aspect of knowing that you're so young at the position. It feels like, if nothing else, that you could tread water with him as a starter. And hopefully you're right, and that doesn't happen. Because I'll tell you, the difference for me is, if he's on the field, he's got to be at the nickel, which means Snead has to be outside. The difference is, for me, and I think it's him and Fenton fighting there for who's going to be on the field with Ward and Snead. But the interesting thing about Fenton is, I think he and Snead can then flip back and forth. I think they're a lot more pliable and let Spags play some more games of personnel.
And I've had a couple of conversations with folks this week about kind of this, and and my point being that the Chiefs secondary is not where it was 3 or 4 years ago, in that they were able to sign guys in August off the street to come in and start for the secondary. And honestly, they're not there right now. There's only one player that I think the Chiefs could sign off the street to come in and play significant time in the secondary, and it's Bashaud Breeland. Yep. And and that may be very well the kind of back pocket option. I mean, and I think that's what maybe even Bashaud Breeland is just sitting back waiting for at this point, whether it's Kansas City or elsewhere. Once an injury hits or somebody doesn't work out, Bashaud Breeland's getting a call from somebody, and I can't rule out that it's Kansas City. I mean, at this point, if you were going to ask me who's starting in the Chiefs secondary in week 1, I'd put more money on Bashaud Breeland than Mike Hughes starting.
Oh, I like that. And folks, remember, somebody gets hurt every OTAs. It will happen. Someone will have the need. Well, I'm glad. I'm really eager to see how this comes out, but we're going to keep checking in on. Thanks for spending the time today, Matt.
Absolutely, Ryan. Always great talking to you.
Chiefs Digest, KC Sports Network, check them all out. Hit the Twitter thing. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.